The screaming started before anyone knew what the envelope even was. 1 second, the dining room in my parents' house was quiet, except for the faint clink of dessert plates. The next, my mother's chair scraped violently across the hardwood as she shot up, waving a sheet of paper with shaking hands. My father's voice boomed through the room, sharp and panicked, and the air turned electric, thick enough to choke on. Lily, my daughter, flinched so hard her spoon dropped onto her plate. My sister froze, her half-eaten tiramisu trembling on her fork. Across the table, my niece Haley looked stunned, like someone had just yanked her out of a dream. I watched my mother's face twist, watched the color drain from my father's cheeks, and I knew before a single word was spoken that something terrible had just detonated in the middle of our family. When my mother finally found her voice, it wasn't soft or confused. It was furious, betrayed, and every syllable she spat out sliced straight through the room, and straight through my daughter. Because whatever was in that envelope, whatever set my parents off, was tied directly to Lily. I could feel it before I even reached for her hand. The air around us vibrated with revelation, accusation, and the kind of truth that doesn't politely knock. It kicks the door in. Before we go on, tell me where you're listening from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt overlooked by the people who should have cared for you. My name is Jessica Monroe. I'm 43 years old, and for most of my life I believed my family was simply a little complicated. That was my polite way of ignoring years of small hurts and quiet imbalances, things easier to swallow than confront. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, the older daughter who always seemed to understand when plans revolved around someone else. My parents are the kind who present well-neat house-polite voices, perfect smiles for church directories and holiday cards. But behind closed doors, love wasn't shared equally. When my sister Melissa had her daughter Haley at 20, my parents transformed overnight into doting grandparents, the kind who kept scrapbooks, attended every school play, and had a dozen photos framed around the house. And I was genuinely happy for them, or at least that's what I told myself. But when Lily was born 3 years later, something subtle shifted. My mother held her for a few minutes, commented vaguely that she looked sleepy, and passed her back with a polite smile. No framed photos appeared, no new traditions were created, no drawers labeled for Lily's things. It wasn't malicious, not outright, just quiet preferences that hardened into habit. Melissa's family came first. Haley's needs came first. My parents didn't say it, they didn't have to. It was stitched into every birthday they forgot, every recital they skipped, every holiday, where Lily sat politely at the table while Haley basked in prize-winner applause for simply existing. But I told myself the same story for years. My parents loved Lily just differently. And Lily, sweet as she was, never complained. She grew quiet around them, careful, almost invisible in their house. I ignored it because acknowledging it felt like tearing a seam I didn't know how to sew back up. And then came that dinner. The one Haley turned into a performance announcing she'd made an offer on a house, something my 20-year-old niece had never even hinted she was preparing to do. Everyone celebrated. My mother pressed a hand to her chest as if Haley had just handed her a grandchild's heartbeat. My father lifted his glass with pride, thick enough to taste. Melissa beamed like her daughter had cured cancer. And Lily? My Lily sat completely still, staring at her untouched tiramisu like she was trying to swallow something too jagged to speak about. I thought she was tired. I thought it was nerves, or maybe just another small moment where she felt secondary. I didn't know it was something far worse. Something deliberate. Something with numbers Lily shouldn't have had to carry alone. I didn't know the truth was already sitting inside her chest like a weight too heavy for an 18-year-old to lift. The house glowed warm that night, full of laughter and clinking glasses, but for the first time I felt cold sitting at my parents' dining table. A strange creeping cold that whispered that something was very wrong. And when Lily excused herself, pulling on her coat and insisting she'd take the bus because she needed the air, I let her go, completely unaware that the real storm was already waiting for us at home. And what she would tell me next would tear the lid off everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the people I once trusted most. The grass was wet that morning, soaking through the back of my dress as I sat on the edge of the bleachers. I was 9, shivering in the early Wisconsin chill, waiting for my parents to show up for the school play I had practiced for weeks. Children in crooked cardboard crowns shuffled past me, their parents waving, calling their names, snapping pictures. I kept craning my neck toward the parking lot, searching for my mother's burgundy sedan. The sun climbed higher, warming the shoulders of the parents, who gathered near the front, but my seat stayed cold. When the teacher finally closed the backstage door, she gave me that soft smile adults use when they're about to lie. "Jessica, we need to line up now." I nodded, swallowing around a lump that tasted like metal. I walked on stage in my wrinkled costume to an auditorium of strangers' faces and the 2 empty chairs reserved just for them. A breath passed, then 2. I glanced at the parking lot one last time, still nothing, and when the play ended, when the children ran into open arms, I stood alone clutching the paper scepter I had made myself. It felt heavier than it should have, like it belonged to someone braver. Years later, I would tell myself they must have been busy, that it wasn't personal. But in that moment, sitting on the damp grass behind the school after everyone left, I remember one clear thought: I shouldn't have expected anything else. That memory has a way of opening a door I've spent decades trying to close. And as I sit here now, replaying the present-day ache in Lily's eyes, it's impossible not to feel that same wet grass beneath me, that same weight of being quietly forgotten. My relationship with my parents was built on that kind of quiet erosion, little chips carved out over years, so small individually that I convinced myself they didn't matter. But wounds don't disappear just because you convince yourself they're insignificant. They sit under the skin until something sharp presses down on them again. Growing up, Melissa was the child who shimmered, not because she asked for it, at least not at the beginning, but because my parents decided she was easier to shine. She was the baby who slept through the night, the preschooler who had a perfect cursive M by age 6, the teenager who could charm a room before she even spoke. I wasn't unloved. I wasn't ignored. It was much quieter than that, and somehow more complicated. I was expected. Expected to understand, expected to adjust, expected to take the smaller piece without asking why Melissa's was always bigger. If Melissa got praise, I got responsibility. If she struggled, the family rallied. If I struggled, I was told to toughen up because life won't bend for you, sweetheart. By the time I was in high school, the roles were written so deeply into our lives that none of us questioned them. When Melissa came home with a speeding ticket, my parents treated it as a misunderstanding. When I did, it was proof I needed to work on my judgment. When Melissa forgot a cousin's birthday gift, Mom shrugged and said she was under pressure. When I forgot one, they told me it was rude and that I needed to be more thoughtful. These weren't dramatic moments. No slamming doors, no shouting, no scenes fit for a family drama. They were the softer cuts, the kind you barely notice until the bandage comes off and you realize how deep it goes. And I accepted it, all of it. Because I adored my family. I wanted to believe that being the easy one was a compliment. I thought that staying quiet meant keeping the peace, and keeping the peace was what a good daughter does. When Melissa had Haley at 20, my parents became grandparents, the way other people become born-again Christians, devoted overnight, armed with purpose. They poured themselves into that baby with an enthusiasm that stunned me, and I was proud of them. Truly. It felt like a second chance for all of us, a moment to rewrite whatever had gone wrong between me and my parents. But when Lily was born 3 years later, I watched that hope slip through my hands like water. The first time my mother held Lily, she looked at her with polite distance as though admiring someone else's child. She looked sleepy, she said, and passed her back with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. No photos, no scrapbooks, no shopping trips for baby clothes. When I asked once if she could babysit so I could return to work, she told me she didn't want to uproot her schedule, but somehow she was available whenever my sister needed a night out. Still, I tried not to let it get to me. I wanted them to love Lily. I wanted to believe they did. But the years kept carving the truth into smaller, sharper pieces. I remember one Thanksgiving when Haley was 6 and Lily was 3. Haley had drawn a turkey with carefully glued feathers, and my mother taped it proudly to the refrigerator. Lily had scribbled something abstract with bright colors, something that in her little mind was art, and my mother set it aside on the counter and said, Maybe we'll hang this at home someday. We never did. Lily asked me about that drawing once, months later, in her small, quiet voice. Did Grandma not like mine? I told her something gentle, something reassuring. But even then, I could feel another old bruise forming under the surface. It didn't stop as the girls grew older. For Haley's 9th birthday, my parents rented out a party room at the community center, complete with a magician and a cotton candy machine. For Lily's 9th birthday, they mailed a gift card not even addressed in my mother's handwriting. On Christmas mornings, Haley got a mountain of gifts wrapped in coordinated paper. Lily got a sweater or a book, usually something practical, sometimes still in the store bag. When Lily was 12 and made straight A's, my parents told her that's what they expected from her. When Haley managed a B-, they took her out to celebrate because she had been trying so hard. I can't count the number of times I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they're more comfortable with Melissa's family. Maybe Lily is too quiet. Maybe I'm imagining it. But kids notice even when they pretend not to. And Lily, gentle, thoughtful, wide-eyed, Lily absorbed every unbalanced moment with the quiet resignation of someone who didn't want to inconvenience anyone with her feelings. One memory still stings more than most. Lily was 14, and she'd baked a tray of brownies completely from scratch. She was proud in that soft, fragile way kids are at that age. We brought them to my parents' house for a weekend dinner, and Lily's whole face lit up when she placed the plate on the counter. My mother glanced at them for barely a second. "Oh, honey, I'm cutting back on sugar," she said. "I'm sure they're lovely, though." 10 minutes later, she offered Haley a slice of store-bought cheesecake she had saved just for you, sweetheart. Lily didn't say anything. She simply folded the foil back over her brownies and carried them to the car when we left, her smile tight, her shoulders a little smaller. That was the night I cried in my room while she slept, not because of the brownies, but because of what they represented, the years of subtle rejections of my daughter, shrinking herself to fit a space that was never shaped for her. And through all of it, I stayed quiet. I convinced myself that confronting my parents would only drive us further apart. I told myself that Lily didn't need the same affection Haley got, that she had me, and that was enough. I put my head down and pushed forward, because mothers learn to carry what hurts if it means keeping the family intact. But time has a way of showing you the cracks you ignored. When Lily turned 18, I didn't realize how much all those years had taught her to internalize every disappointment, to believe that giving more might finally earn her the love she quietly longed for. She learned that bending made things smoother, that sacrificing made people comfortable, that love in our family required a kind of surrender. So when my mother came to her with a trembling voice and a story about a surgery she couldn't afford, Lily didn't hesitate. She didn't question. She didn't ask me. She gave. She gave everything she had, because that's the version of love she had been taught. And that's what keeps me up at night. Not just the money, not just the lie, but the realization that my silence, decades of swallowing, smoothing, excusing, built the doorway my mother walked through when she took my daughter's future and handed it to someone else. Because when Lily showed me that wire transfer, her face crumpling but still trying to be brave, I saw all those buried moments rise to the surface. I saw the lonely girl who never wanted to seem ungrateful, the teenager who never wanted to be a problem, the young woman who thought generosity might finally bridge a gap she never created. And in that moment, something inside me shifted, not suddenly, but like a fault line, giving after years of pressure. Because this didn't start with the stolen money. It didn't start with Haley's house announcement. It didn't even start with my mother's lie. It started years ago in small moments, quiet dismissals and celebrations where one child shined while another learned to dim herself. And if I hadn't been blind, or maybe just scared, it wouldn't have taken Lily breaking for me to finally see the whole picture. Now as I sit beside her, watching her shoulders slowly rise and fall as she sleeps, I can feel it. A shift coming. A reckoning I didn't ask for, but can no longer avoid. Because something in the present, something I haven't fully uncovered yet, is about to bring every buried truth crashing into the light. Lily's door was half open when I stepped past it, but it wasn't the room that stopped me. It was the glow from the kitchen. A thin strip of light cut across the hardwood floor, and the soft, tapping, rapid, uneven, echoed through the quiet house. I followed it barefoot, my heart already tightening even before I knew why. Lily sat at the table in her hoodie shoulders tense, phone in hand. She didn't look up, not even when I called her name. Then slowly she turned the screen toward me. A bank statement glared back, her bank statement showing the transfer clear as day. $43,000. Under it, the memo. For surgery. Hope you're okay. Before I could speak, another notification popped up. A text from my mother. Don't mention this to your mom. She'll just worry. Lily's fingers shook as she clicked it open. More messages appeared, screenshots she had saved. Messages with my mother's words spelled out in cold blue bubbles. It's urgent. I didn't want to burden anyone else. You're so thoughtful, sweetheart. My throat went dry. Then Lily tapped one more file, an email she'd forwarded to herself. And there it was, a confirmation of the wire transfer on the exact morning she'd turned 18. The room felt smaller with each new line of text. I remember standing there staring at the screen, barely breathing, because the truth doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it arrives quietly in a dimly lit kitchen at 2 a.m, carried on the soft tremble of your daughter's hands. What I saw on that screen, it changed everything. The pieces fell together faster than I could speak. For months, I'd sensed something shifting in Lily, something tightening in her smile, something careful in the way she asked for nothing. I told myself it was just senior year stress, the transition to adulthood. I never imagined she was carrying the weight of a lie crafted by someone who should have protected her. As I held the phone, I felt the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind, no, this was deeper. The kind of stillness that forms when the truth finally catches up to the years you tried to outrun it. Lily's eyes searched mine, haunted but brave. I thought she needed me, she whispered. And in that moment, I felt something inside me fracture. Not from shock, not anymore, but from recognition. Because I'd been here before, just in different shapes, different years, different moments, where belief cost me more than the truth ever did. I drew a shaky breath and forced myself to look again at the messages. Each one revealed a part of my mother I'd spent years trying not to acknowledge. The way she softened her words just enough to sound helpless. The way she positioned herself as someone Lily needed to fix. And worst of all, the way she weaponized secrecy, not with threats, but with guilt. Lily clicked open the very first text my mother sent her on her 18th birthday. It was short, almost tender. Since you're an adult now, I trust you. I wouldn't ask if it weren't serious. That line, that exact line, was the first domino. My mother had waited very deliberately for the day Lily gained access to her own savings. She didn't reach out a week earlier. Not the night before, not even the morning of until the transfer was possible. It wasn't coincidence. It was timing, calculated, quiet, precise. And then beneath that message I saw something that stung more deeply than the numbers. You're the only one who would understand. Please keep this between us. The kind of sentence meant to tie a knot around someone's loyalty. I knew that technique. I'd grown up with it. I'd excused it, softened it, rationalized it. But now, looking at Lily's trembling hands, I saw it for what it truly was, manipulation dressed in the language of family love. Lily set the phone down and stared at the table. She didn't ask me what to do. She didn't need to. She already knew what this meant, even if she didn't want to say it out loud. I reached for her hand, and for the first time in years, I felt anger rise in me, unfiltered, without apology, without hesitation. It wasn't the hot, explosive kind. It was cold, focused. The kind that comes from seeing the truth in a light so stark you can't unsee it. My entire life I had been conditioned to swallow discomfort so no one else had to face it. I'd learned to keep peace with my parents at the expense of my own self-respect, and somewhere along the way I taught my daughter the same reflex. But this was the moment the pattern finally snapped. I took the phone from her and opened the bank confirmation again. The numbers stared back. Amount $43,000, recipient Carolyn Monroe. Memo for surgery. Hope you're okay. It was the memo that broke something loose inside me. Because Lily didn't just give her grandmother money. She gave her worry, compassion, trust. She gave her a piece of herself. A teenager barely stepping into adulthood, handing over the very thing she spent years saving because someone she loved spoke a lie with enough vulnerability to make it sound true. I thought of the years of quiet favoritism, the holidays, where Lily sat on the sidelines, the birthdays pushed aside, the praise handed in the wrong direction. And I realized something chilling. My mother didn't just see Lily's kindness. She counted on it. Counted on the fact that Lily had learned to make herself small for the sake of others. Counted on a lifetime of being pushed aside to make Lily believe her feelings didn't matter. And I had let it happen. That truth hit harder than any betrayal. Lily's voice cracked. "Mom, I didn't want to disappoint her." Those words. Simple, devastating. A child still trying to earn approval that should have been unconditional. I put the phone down carefully, like it was something fragile, though it was really my heart that felt breakable in my hands. And as I met Lily's eyes, something shifted in the space between us, something I couldn't put into words yet, but felt like a flame catching after years of kindling. The more I looked at the messages, the more the story unraveled, the surgery that didn't exist, the urgency that was fabricated, the secrecy that served no purpose except to exclude me, the daughter my mother knew, would ask questions. And then there was the timing of Haley's house announcement, cheerful and triumphant, echoing the exact sum Lily had given away. The dots weren't hard to connect. I had simply refused to see the picture. Standing there, the kitchen light buzzing faintly overhead, I felt the weight of every year I'd chosen silence. Every moment I brushed off every red flag I folded neatly and placed on a high shelf. But now those flags were falling one by one, landing at my feet. I remembered the childhood play where my parents never showed, the birthdays where Lily was an afterthought, the way my mother's eyes always softened for Haley, never for Lily. All those small wounds, they weren't separate moments. They formed a pattern, a blueprint I'd ignored until it cost my daughter her future. And beneath the anger, beneath the grief, something else took shape, resolve, the kind that doesn't arrive quietly, the kind that rises steady and certain after years of being dormant. I wasn't going to let this stand, not this time, not with Lily. She had already sacrificed far too much in hopes of being seen by people who never learned to look for her. I could not ask her to be the one to confront this. That burden was mine, the one I should have taken on years ago. I turned off the kitchen light and placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. She leaned into it just slightly, as though unsure if she was allowed to. And that alone pushed me past the final threshold. The truth was no longer avoidable. It was no longer negotiable. It was staring at us from a glowing screen, demanding action. And action was exactly what I intended to take. Because the minute I saw the transfer, the minute I saw the lie spelled out in my mother's handwriting, I understood this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't family complexity. It was theft, emotional and financial. And it was time to call it what it was. As I walked Lily to her room and kissed her forehead, one thought pulsed steady and unshakable in my chest. Tomorrow I would confront my mother. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to walk into that house quietly. Lily's fork slipped from her hand and clattered onto the china, just as every head in the dining room turned toward me. My mother froze mid-pour, red wine trembling in the neck of the bottle. My father's jaw locked. Melissa stopped talking mid-sentence, her smile stiffening at the edges. Haley set her glass down slowly, the stem clicking against the table. I didn't sit. I didn't breathe. I placed the manila folder in the center of the table right on top of my mother's embroidered table runner and opened it. The first page, the bank transfer, faced upward. The second page slid out beneath it, the printout of the text messages. Gasps rose like a wave. My mother's hand flew to her throat. My father whispered, "What is this?" even though he was staring directly at his granddaughter's stolen future. And across the table, Lily looked at me with wide, trembling eyes, as if she couldn't quite believe I was actually doing it, that after a lifetime of letting things slide, I was choosing this moment to finally stop being quiet. "You're going to explain this," I said. My voice didn't shake. The room did. But to understand how we landed at that table, how my family's smiles curdled into shock, you'd have to know that I didn't walk into that house unprepared. I hadn't slept the night before. I spent the hours between midnight and dawn gathering every scrap of proof I could find, every message Lily forwarded to herself, every bank record, every timestamp tying my mother's surgery story directly to my daughter's 18th birthday. I printed everything out because paper can't be deleted. Paper doesn't vanish when a phone is smashed or a cloud sync accidentally fails. As I organized it all on the kitchen counter, I felt an old part of myself waking up, the part I had buried under decades of politeness, the part that knew how to protect, fight, build, and dismantle. By sunrise, everything was packed into the manila folder, not to destroy my parents, not even to win, but to make sure my daughter never again had to wonder if she mattered enough for someone to stand up for her. When Melissa invited us to dinner that night, one of her casual family nights meant to smooth things over, I knew that was the moment. My parents would be there. Haley would be there. Everyone who needed to hear the truth would be in the same room. And for once, I wasn't stepping into their house small or tentative. I walked in with evidence. I walked in with intention. I walked in ready. Dinner began with forced laughs and stiff niceties. My mother commented on Lily's sweater, as though nothing had happened. My father asked about her classes with the practiced normalcy of someone who still believed the lie might hold if he acted natural enough. I watched Haley talk about furniture for her new house while my parents beamed like benefactors. The performance was nauseating. Halfway through dessert, when the room hit that manufactured warmth my mother always prided herself on cultivating, I stood up. Chairs stopped moving. Forks hung midair. And that's where the moment began. My mother was the first to speak. "Jessica, what are you doing?" "Something overdue," I said. The printouts spread across the table like fallen cards. Lily's name, my mother's words, the amount, the memo line, all of it, exposed under the chandelier's glow. My father squinted at the papers, blinking quickly, as though his eyes might rearrange the truth into something more convenient. "Jessica, this is a misunderstanding." "Then explain it," I said calmly. "Explain the non-existent surgery, the secrecy, the timing. Explain why my daughter's entire college fund went straight from her account into yours and then straight from yours into a house deposit for Haley." Haley's breath caught, a tiny sharp sound. Melissa's face dropped, her confidence unraveling. My mother held herself still, too still. "Your daughter made a kind choice. Generosity shouldn't be punished." "It's only generosity," I replied, "when the person asking isn't lying." The word lying struck the room like a physical force. Melissa slammed her hand onto the table. "Oh, for God's sake, Jess, don't be dramatic. Mom didn't steal," Lily offered. Offered, I repeated quietly, because she was told her grandmother needed urgent medical care, because she believed someone she loved was in pain. My mother flinched barely, but I saw it. I wasn't done. And because she was specifically instructed not to tell me, I added, which is never what honest people ask for. Haley whispered, "You told her not to tell anyone." My mother's mask cracked. A hairline fracture, small but fatal. It wasn't meant to cause trouble. It was a simple request for privacy. Privacy, I said, is when you don't share your health issues, not when you extract money from a teenager under false pretenses. The table fell silent. And then came the twist, because the truth always has roots deeper than you expect. I pulled out the last document. A printed screenshot. "Do you know what this is?" I asked. My sister leaned forward reluctantly. "What now?" I slid it toward the center. Haley picked it up first. Her eyes widened instantly. It was an email confirmation sent 3 days before Lily turned 18. Sent from my mother's computer. It was a drafted wire transfer template with an empty line for an account number, ready to be filled in, ready to send, and in the memo field already typed weeks before the lie was delivered. Surgery payment. The room went dead still, my mother's face drained of color. Haley's voice cracked. "Grandma, this was before her birthday." Melissa's mouth opened, closed, opened again. My father whispered, "Carolyn, please tell me that's not what it looks like." But everyone in the room knew exactly what it was. It was premeditation. The lie wasn't impulsive. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't a misunderstanding born of desperation or confusion. It was planned, saved, prepared. My mother had intended to take that money before Lily even had legal access to it. That was the moment the room turned. Haley pushed her chair back and stood. "So you didn't give me a gift," she said, her voice tight with shock. "You stole it." My mother reached for her. "Sweetheart, no." Haley stepped away. "Don't call me sweetheart. Not after this." Melissa looked from the document to our mother, rage and disbelief battling across her features. "You told us it was your savings." My mother stammered. "It became my savings once Lily gave it freely." Lily blinked hard. "My name is Lily." Her voice, quiet, trembling, cut through the room with more strength than any of us expected. My mother froze as though hearing Lily's voice for the first time. Lily continued, "And I didn't give freely. I gave because you lied. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply the truth spoken out loud, something that had rarely happened in my family. The effect was immediate. My father sank into his chair, face crumpling with something that looked almost like shame. Melissa's eyes glittered with anger as she pushed her plate away. "I told you, Mom," she hissed. "I told you this would blow up." "It wasn't supposed to," my mother began. But this time I cut her off. "No," I said, standing taller than I felt. "It wasn't supposed to be confronted. That's the difference." She stared at me like she couldn't recognize the woman in front of her. "You expected the same silence you got from me for years," I said, meeting her eyes steadily. "You counted on it. But you didn't count on one thing." I reached for Lily's hand. "You didn't count on me choosing her over the version of you I've been trying to believe in." The room was quiet except for the ticking of the dining room clock. I gathered the papers, sliding them back into the folder. "We're done here." My mother stood abruptly, voice breaking. "You're making a mistake." I turned toward the doorway. "The only mistake," I said, "was letting this go on as long as it did." Lily rose, her hand warm in mine. Haley stayed seated, head bowed, processing the truth she'd just watched unravel. Melissa muttered something under her breath, but even she didn't stop us. Not this time. My father didn't look up, and my mother, still standing, still trembling, had nothing left to say now that the performance was over. As Lily and I stepped outside into the cool evening air, the door clicking shut behind us, the silence was almost startling. Clean, wide, honest. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight of their expectations. I was carrying something far stronger, the decision to protect my daughter, even if it meant burning every old script I had been taught to follow. And behind us, in that dining room full of stunned faces and unraveling lies, the old version of our family collapsed quietly into dust. When the front door closed behind us, the night felt strangely wide, like the world had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. Lily stood beside me on the porch, her fingers still laced through mine, both of us staring at the dark street ahead, as if it were a road we'd never noticed until now. The noise from inside, raised voices, hurried whispers faded into a dull hum, then into nothing at all. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt clean, liberating. I watched Lily pull in a shaky breath, her shoulders rising and lowering with a steadiness she hadn't had in months. And right there in the cool Wisconsin air, I realized that something fundamental had shifted, not just in the family, but in us. We walked to the car without speaking, but the quiet between us had changed. It wasn't burdened. It was beginning to heal. In the days that followed, I felt myself slowly returning to the surface, like someone who had been underwater far longer than they meant to be. Confrontation always comes with uncertainty, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was focused on truth, on repair, on the life Lily and I were choosing from here on out. The legal steps were surprisingly straightforward. Facts have a sturdiness that lies can't compete with. The court reviewed the statements, the messages, the timeline, and the decision came down clean and direct. The full amount taken from Lily had to be returned along with the fees for forcing her into a battle she never should have faced. When the ruling was read aloud, Lily didn't smile. She just closed her eyes and let out a breath that sounded like a door unlocking. Within weeks, the money was back in her account, but the real reclamation didn't come from a deposit. It came from watching my daughter finally carry herself like someone who knew she mattered. At home, we made changes that felt small but carried weight. We cleaned the spare room that had become a catch-all over the years, the one Lily once considered just storage. Together, we moved boxes out, opened windows wide, let the late afternoon sun spill across the hardwood. We painted the walls a warm sage green, her choice, and she placed her psychology textbooks on the shelves with a care that bordered on reverence. "This is my space now," she said softly. It always was, I told her, but we both knew that wasn't entirely true, not until now. As for my parents and Melissa, I stepped back without anger, without grand declarations. Just distance, steady, firm, unbreakable. There were calls I didn't return messages. I left unread invitations I never acknowledged. Not out of cruelty, but clarity. Some relationships cannot be fixed by proximity or polite wishes. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself, for your child, is to stop reopening wounds that were never meant to heal under the same roof. Lily followed suit in her own quiet way. She blocked the numbers she needed to block. She removed photographs from her corkboard and placed the ones she wanted to keep into a drawer. Not thrown away, just set aside. She was choosing what deserved space in her life and what had already taken too much. People often imagine healing as grand gestures or dramatic reinventions, but in reality, it came to us in small kindnesses from unexpected places. My coworker Susan left a note on my desk one morning after hearing that Lily had finally enrolled for her first semester. "Proud of you two, truly." Our neighbor Mr. Lee brought over a stack of psychology journals he'd saved from his teaching days. "Thought she might like these," he said, shrugging off any attempt at thanks. It wasn't fanfare or celebration. It was quiet support, the kind we had never received from the places we once depended on. And it filled the empty corners of our life in a way I hadn't realized we needed. By late autumn, Lily was settled at the University of Wisconsin, thriving in a routine she built herself. She came home on weekends, sometimes dropping her bag by the door, her eyes bright with stories about classes and professors and new friends who saw her as she truly was, smart, gentle, strong, in ways she didn't fully recognize yet. One Saturday afternoon, she walked onto the porch carrying a small potted fern she'd bought from a student fundraiser. "I thought we could put this out here," she said. "Feels like a good time to grow something." We placed it beside the old railing, the green leaves trembling in the soft wind. She stood there for a long moment, her face softened in a way I hadn't seen since she was a child, as if she were finally breathing without bracing herself. And in that simple moment, just the two of us, a quiet porch and a plant barely a foot tall, I realized we were building something entirely new. Not perfect, not polished, but ours. In the end, we didn't rise from this with triumph or some dramatic redemption arc. We rose slowly, steadily in the quiet ways people do when they're done pretending and ready to choose themselves. Lily learned that her kindness isn't a currency. I learned that silence isn't the same as peace. And together we learned that family is not defined by blood, but by the people who show up without conditions. When I look back on the whole journey, the betrayal, the confrontation, the unraveling, I no longer see disaster. I see clarity. A painful gift, but a gift all the same. And I've come to believe something I wish I'd learned sooner. Sometimes the life you rebuild from broken pieces is stronger, steadier, and far more honest than the one you were trying to hold together.